Welcome to Personalist Manifestos. This is actually the second part of a three-part conversation that I have had with my colleague Joel Korytko about Genesis, civilization, and the city. So before you listen to this conversation, make sure you go and listen to part one. And with that, here's the second part of my conversation with Joel. I also sense a throwback to Adam's naming, but not in a good way. So, in the same way that Adam was called to name the animals, when he gets through all of that, uh, there's no helper or strong ally or Azer there to to partner with Adam, and he's lonely, right? So God says it's not good that Adam should be alone, so he makes Eve out of his side. And when Adam sees her, he breaks forth into what seems like a song. And he doesn't name her Eve. He says, "She shall be called woman because she's taken out of me." So there's this mirroring there. The names are very similar. And it's only after the fall that Adam names her Eve because she will be the mother of all the living. So whereas before you get a poem or a song, after you get a constricting function, right? This is a guy who's saying, "I'm going to name her basically Baby Maker." Now that's
Yeah.
not that you know that's a bad thing or task in and of itself. But if you just limit a person to that, it's pretty constricting. Whereas before you were singing songs, now you're just describing a particular biological function to that person.
Mhm.
So then they
It's
have,
utilitarian in that way. Yeah.
yeah, exactly. So then they have their sons, Cain and Abel, and Cain ends up murdering Abel because they both offer gifts or sacrifices to God. Cain's the tiller of the ground, the farmer, as it were, the proto farmer, and Abel is the shepherd. And they both bring their offerings, and Cain brings something from the ground, and Abel brings a an animal sacrifice, and God prefers Abel's sacrifice, and Cain's face falls, and God says, like, be careful, like, why is your face fallen? You know, if you do good, you'll be okay, but I think sin's crouching at the door here. Um, and sure enough, we see Cain murder his brother. And there's a lot of speculation on why God rejected Cain's sacrifice and accepted Abel's. And one of the things that I ponder, feel free to give your reflections on it, but if one of the parts of the curses coming out of Genesis 3 is not just, enmity between the man, the woman, and the snake, but also having to labor for food now. By the sweat of your brow you will produce food from the ground, right? So that's where creation changes. It's no longer hospitable. It'll have thorns and thistles, and you gotta work for your food now. That's part of the curse. Well, Cain's the first one who has to deal with those effects if he's the one who is tasked with being the farmer, whereas Abel is just looking after the sheep, running around on the ground and the sheep graze, but he's not having to deal with the consequences of the curse in the way that Abel is not having to deal with the consequences of the curse in the way that Cain is. So I actually think there's a sort of built up resentment there, and
Oh
we
yeah.
see that rear its ugly head when he murders his brother, and he tries to play it off. I don't know where he is when God asks, but God's like, actually, I know where he is because I can hear his blood crying out from the ground. What do you make of that reading? What do you think? Does it hold up?
Yeah. Oh, I like it. Yeah. It's like Cain is saying, like, I'm like strapping up my boots here, buddy, and trying to deal with this curse. And I'm doing the labor on the ground, and you're just you're walking around with sheep. And
Yeah.
yet God wants you. It's
Yeah.
like, are you kidding me? And you can already see like Cain is already invested in the agriculture, right? His mind is already headed towards the city,
Yeah.
um, which is interesting because it's like again riffing on this idea of okay, like what the mind that is set on that on the
He's like,
city on
what
yeah
can I set up here?
yeah
Yeah.
yeah
Yeah. Yeah. So,
totally. I think that's there,
yeah.
and yeah, there is the whole idea of the sacrifices that are going on here. Why is one being accepted over the other? I mean, this is notoriously vexing for what's going on. I talked about sacred space before and how we're dealing with temple imagery. I think that continues here. There's an altar of sacrifice outside of the doors of the Garden of Eden. There's an altar of sacrifice outside of the doors of the sanctuary where there's cherubim blocking on both. This is all temple. And so they are standing at the place where they can enter back into the presence of God. And uh, Cain is offering one thing, which isn't necessarily wrong, things from the ground. That's good. But Abel is offering first fruits, it says, first, Bechor, and of his flock. And so it's two different types of sacrifice, which are then being asked, like, what gets you back into God's presence? What is God? What does God accept? What would be a way to bridge and break down this barrier
Hmm.
between God and us? And so you've got Cain looking towards the ground, looking to the curse, getting his mind off of the garden, so to speak, and onto like the task in front of you. Whereas Abel is going like less focused on that and more focused on what would be pleasing to God out of this offering. And so animal sacrifice is what we find then in the book of Leviticus and other elsewhere, but and then blood as well. Blood being representative in the Old Testament of life.
Hmm.
And so Cain or Abel, sorry, is offering something that corresponds to what we see in something like Leviticus, where life, how I understand the giving of blood is less about punitive measures for being represented, but rather it's an offering of self. So you offer a blameless animal, blameless blood, and firstborns, first fruits, especially to God, as in like your heart is set on God first. It's the first part of what I have is going to God, and so he's not only offering the first part, God is first in mind, but he's also offering blameless blood, which is representative of his own desire to be blameless before God. And that offering, that heart, that disposition is one that God accepts. Even when this person is not going out to do the groundwork, who's not going out to do all that, like God is looking for a certain disposition, which Cain does not have. So like you said, Cain's face falls, and God then says, "Hey, by the way, like don't let this let this be a learning experience here." Uh, and there's different translations. One way to take it is like sin is crouching at the door, like kind of like this idea of the sin is like a lion or something gonna get you. Another way to translate it is actually a sin offering is here for you, and you can make use of it. This idea of again, God is offering the way for Cain to go forward. Like, hey, we can clear this up. Sin offering is a certain type of offering in Leviticus, and he's saying there's a way we can clear this up. Fix your heart here. Let's purify the space, and this and your inclinations, and make an offering to me here at the door. It's all this language is actually representative
Yeah.
of Leviticus, where there's an offering that you can make at the door, the petach, and the same idea is here. There's an offering you can make at the petach of the Garden of Eden, and so it's really God offering even to this person who's very city set, a way back to the presence to turn his head back towards God and away from the current way he's going, which we
Yeah.
see is already headed towards. He's going to end up building a city and a name for himself. And there's something wrong with the heart. Um, there's actually another pun I didn't I could have mentioned. This is my own like musing,
Yeah.
but I think that Cain is going to be he's going to be compared to the snake in a way because the snake, you remember that it says that the snake is more naked than anything else. The snake is more crafty. It says, but that word there actually looks just like the word for naked. So they look very similar. They're based on similar roots.
Yeah.
So if you're reading in Hebrew, when you see that the snake is more crafty, it would look very much like the snake is more naked than the rest. And so there's this pun going on again. So Adam and Eve are naked, but even more so is the snake, who is arum is the term. But if you read it in Hebrew, the word Aram for the snake is the word for city. It's the same letters, Ayin, Yod, Resh. with a mem on the end, and the mem can make something into an abstract. And so it's
Oh,
like the snake is more city-like than anyone else, and then Cain is going to go and be more city-like than anyone else, and he's going to embrace that way of living,
yeah,
unquestionably, and build
yeah.
his own name. And so he's going to become Aram,
Yeah.
city-like, snake-like, naked, more naked
Okay.
than the rest, and
Yeah.
he's going to be yeah. And so I
Okay.
think this is all going on here. Ellul actually points out that Ir also means terror, and so when Cain's building the city, he's going to build a terror. And again, it's questioning how valuable is the city east of Eden, east further away from God, when the disposition of the heart, even though God offered, hey, I can get you back to a place, to a way of being where you're in communion with me. But Cain instead, he's going like the snake. He's going to become Aram. He's going to become city-like. Yeah,
Come on. So, and as you're just talking here, I'm like, that's third level inception, then fourth level inception. Okay. The dream level,
spin the
plurals,
coin.
levels. Uh, and what symbol did the Canaanites have for their religion, Joel?
I'm actually not even sure where you're going right now.
I'm pretty sure the Canaanites had a serpent. Like that was a religious symbol, wasn't it? A sign of
Oh
wisdom.
yeah, oh yeah, the serpent's everywhere in the ancient world.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Okay. So that's next level, right?
yeah. Oh
And
yeah,
this is what I'm talking about with the sages of Israel. They're just like they're just going for the jugular because all the other nations are like not the all the other nations, but some nations are like snake is a sign of wisdom. We worship the snake or whatever.
yeah.
And
It's got a bunch of different. It depends on the
right?
context.
Yes.
For the
Yeah.
snake, the snake can be good, can be bad, but
Yes.
often associated with primordial things in Egypt or elsewhere.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it could be a sign of wisdom or a curse, depending. And so it's really a fluid kind of image, which
Yeah.
is also part of the beauty here.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Yeah, okay,
Yeah,
that's good. That's helpful context. So some would say that it's good, but what we're getting from Israel is really, really bad. And this is
yeah,
Proverbs of like there is a way that seems right to a person, but in the end it leads to death. Like yes, be crafty as a serpent, but be innocent as a dove. That's the
yeah,
most good that we get out of a serpent, right?
yeah,
Be
yeah,
be sharp, right? Don't be dull, but also do it in a way that walks with integrity and peace, right? So so going back to this opening theme, you point this out, and I think it's interesting because Cain doesn't go for that sacrifice. He murders his brother, and the ground opens up to receive his brother's blood.
hmm yep,
And so God approaches him and says, "Where's your brother?" And Cain says, "I don't know. Am I my brother's keeper?" And the answer is yes. And God says, I know where your brother is. You can hear his blood crying out from the ground. Cain is marked and said, you now have to wander on the earth. And Cain's like, who's gonna protect me? People are gonna want to kill me for what I did. And God's like, don't worry. Someone tries to avenge you for what you did to your brother. I'll take care of it sevenfold. But the first thing Cain does is he settles down and he builds a city and he names it Enoch. But he also has a child and also names it Enoch. And what's interesting, the throwback to the naming, just like his dad, he does one worse though, is he doesn't even there's the wife's name's not even mentioned,
hmm
right? So she's nameless, uh, depersonalized. She's just the means to the end of Cain getting a child, which of course you need people to populate a city. And I think what confirms this type of ambition and pride and disobedience of God's command to wander the earth and rely on God for protection is Cain builds a city and has the two names and his wife is nameless. And then of course we get to Lamech and we'll get to Lamech. But
I
yeah,
mean,
you
yeah,
talk about the exposure or nakedness of the city and just the contrast between garden and city, right? The garden is lush, it's enclosed, like it's not limiting, but there's a certain degree of it's not you can't see through it from end to end, right? Whereas the
yeah,
city, it's bare and it's not. really fertile. It's more about function and power, right?
Oh,
Um,
totally. Yeah.
yeah,
I mean, there's all sorts of interesting stuff we could go off that you
yeah,
just said. I mean, some things I just that came to mind, like with the blood of Abel. Um, because again, you've got this contrast of the blood of the animal of the
mm,
offering that Abel's making going to God in a first fruit offering of an animal.
yeah,
But then you've got again with Old Testament blood being equated with life. Life blood goes towards God, right?
hmm,
In offerings, it goes towards the sanctuary.
hmm.
But Abel's blood goes straight to the underworld. Like it goes like his blood gets instead of going towards God, it's going down into the
Dang,
earth and to the underworld. And it's like
lifeblood versus death blood.
yeah, right. And so it's not good. And humans aren't supposed to be offered in Old Testament laws. There's no human sacrifice in my opinion
Yeah,
in the sense of the Levitical
yes,
system.
God doesn't like sacrificing humans. God sacrificed God's self so that we did not have to kill any humans.
Yeah, see my YouTube channel for hours of content on child sacrifice in the Old Testament. Uh,
Yeah,
yeah,
majority report from the Bible, sacrificing people is bad.
yes, majority report
But
confirmed.
I'll link to that content too.
Yeah, yeah. It's interesting that God doesn't kill Cain. I mean, this kind of links into this idea of Pentateuchal legislation, because you'd expect that, because if you kill someone,
Mhm.
Exodus 21:12 says that person should be put to death. However, God he exiles instead. So the death penalty is given, right? He says, "You shall die the day you eat." When talking to Adam and Eve, and he doesn't. He exiles them.
Yeah.
And with Cain breaking the law, and even in Genesis 9, I believe it says like if a human sheds a human's blood, then that human will have vengeance and die themselves. But God doesn't do that.
Mm.
Instead, he exiles. So
Yeah.
the death sentence is equated with exile, which I think is really interesting. I think this happens in the Hebrew Bible where death and exile are very closely connected thematically or
Yeah.
conceptually. It happens in the ancient Near East as well. And to be banished from your homeland is death. Um, and so that's interesting. That God, first off, like it shows something of the mercy of God, doesn't it? It's like even in the first two instances where capital punishment is supposed to happen, God does not. Instead, God says, I will bring it down one level and exile you, even though these are very closely related or arguably synonymous. It's just one shy of that, or yeah, something like that. So I like that. I think the same thing happens in the Golden Calf story. That's a paper you've read, but that we're not going to talk about
It's a
right
great
now.
paper. Yeah, and let the record show that Joel has a very awesome reading of the Golden Calf story coming out, and
At some point,
you should
yeah.
read it. Yeah.
Yeah, we'll see. We'll see.
Yeah.
But it's interesting that so when cities are then built, uh, it's the same idea of like to be sentenced to death or to be exiled are equally kind of terrible fates.
Yeah.
The ancient mind kind of like knew that we need these ties that bind, and without them, we're really reduced to nothing. Right? If you don't have your city, it's a problem. And so, as
Yeah.
much as the city is critiqued in this land east of Eden, without the city, without civilization, like we're doomed. And so, exile and death, and away from our homeland, away from where we ought to be, that's seems to be by God just as much as a punishment as death itself, because it becomes that, right? And so we see later on that now we're going to have the city tied to identity and self, once we've been kicked out of the city of God, so to speak, right?
Yeah.
And so then it's going to be a mixed relationship, because it's going to be a necessity but
Yeah.
also a curse,
Yeah.
and ultimately in need of redemption.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, this is why we talk about law all the time, is that we're coming from a North American context. So when we think about law, we tend to think about a static sort of structure that's sort of dropped in and you just follow it to the letter and all will be well. But that's not the way that Israel thinks about law. It's a living law, and just because it's written down doesn't mean you have to practice it to the full extent. Discernment. So again, even in the cases where it's saying, murder for murder, eye for an eye, or so on. Uh, doesn't mean you have to. You can actually
Hmm.
show mercy, just like God shows mercy. And what you're saying
Oh yeah,
about,
I
yeah,
would just echo that as loud as possible. The
yeah,
first two instances where the death penalty should have been in place, it's exile.
yeah,
And in the golden calf story, I think as well. The first place where Israel with the law, God says, "I'm not going to kill them, not destroy them all for their
Yeah.
idolatry," which is what Exodus 22:19 says should happen to them. So
So
God, in
yeah,
the first three cases, says,
yeah.
"I am not doing capital punishment. Mercy triumphs over judgment in these
Okay,
cases."
so sarcastic theological ethicist comment coming.
Yep,
Just to preload that.
here it comes.
So you're saying, Joel, that the Bible doesn't justify killing other people,
That's a big question. Yeah,
or the Bible doesn't necessarily say, "Hey, get that AR-13. You know, you've been wrong. Get
I would
you do
say the
you."
Bible first and foremost, despite having Talionic principles of eye for an eye, the question is, does God give you eye for an eye and Israel eye for an eye? And the answer is no. Therefore, go and do likewise.
Yeah, that's good to know. That's good to know. I like that. I
Yeah.
like that very much. Um, okay. Uh, what were we talking about? We were talking about,
Talking
oh,
about the
yes,
wilderness
desert.
experience,
Yeah, yeah.
non-existence,
Yes.
chaos, threat,
Okay.
stripping
Sorry, my
away.
sarcasm got me off track. Okay, so yeah, well, this is it, right? Again, there's so much ambiguity, right? Things can go one way, things can go another. So yeah, the wilderness, place of chaos, disorder, threat, all these things. You're everything is taken away, and it's just you, the desert, the heat, lack of food, protection, and scary animals, right?
Yeah.
That can kill you. But it's also the place that God often takes his people in order to redeem them. So it's, yes, the place of threat, but it's also the place of possible redemption and mercy. And of course, when you are in that world and you walk past a city, the city is a sign of what you don't have in that current moment.
Hmm.
And so you can see, oh man, I wish we were in there. They've got wells, they've got food, whatever. They got shelter, they got some shade. They don't have deadly snakes. But on the other hand, I mean, for Israel, cities aren't always a good deal. The amount of,
Hmm.
especially big ones, because a lot of the times in the Bible you see Israel in a big city, it's because they're in exile or
Yeah.
enslaved or
Yeah.
both, right? So on the one hand, you're like in the desert and you're wanting to be in the city, but then you're also like, if you're being liberated from Egypt, you're kind of like, well, I'm glad I'm not in the city, but then disaster strikes in the desert, and then everyone's like, Moses, why did you lead us out here to die?
Yep.
I'd prefer to either be in slavery in the city, with the meat pots and the sweet onions and veggies,
I
or
mean,
if
I would
I'm
do a
gonna
lot for an
die,
onion.
I'd rather die here, right? I'd
Yeah. Oh,
rather
yeah.
die in the city in the comfort of my own home as compared to this hot sandy wilderness with deadly snakes
And no onions.
and no onions.
Here's one thing to know about me. I love cooked onions
Hmm.
so much. So I get it.
Yeah,
If Egypt had cooked onions and the desert didn't, maybe,
yeah,
maybe, but maybe Egypt wasn't so bad.
yeah. Maybe it wasn't so bad to be able to put those fried onions on your hot dog,
On your kebab, yeah.
on your kebab. Yeah.
Yeah. No, it's true. Yeah, like it's funny because yeah, Cain goes out and it's interesting that he's scared of civilization more than he is of the wild.
Hmm.
And like he fears being murdered above being in the open wild, which I don't
Yeah.
know, most of us city folk, we live in oh sorry, no, I live in Chilliwack, and in Chilliwack we got mountains all around us. We can go hike in the mountains. I think there's a perception in the city that if you go hike in the mountains, the bears are going to eat you. By the way, that's not true at all. So I'm not the biggest backpacker, but I have friends who are big backpackers all the time, do days and days out there. Ask them, how often does a bear attack them when they're just in the woods by themselves? Never. Like almost never. Do cougars attack them? Almost never. With their kids? Almost never. Like the wilderness is actually far more safe than you think it is. Of course, discretion. Please don't go out in the wilderness without proper training and equipment. But the wilderness is actually not that bad. It's just you don't have food, but like the animals are not going to kill you, and it's actually a lot not like danger is lower than you think. The city, however, Cain goes, they're gonna kill me.
Hmm.
Like as soon as I go out there and I walk by people, they're gonna kill me. Which I mean raises questions. Why does Cain know? Why are there people? Right? Like
Hmm.
that's a huge question in this text that I don't think there's necessarily a definitive answer for. But it seems like there are other populations at the time of which Cain is afraid.
Hmm.
I mean, you could always think that animals are going to slay Cain, but the word, like the idea of vengeance, it seems like God is talking about people slaying
Yeah.
Cain. So I wonder if there are other populations in this world that Genesis is envisioning. Uh, but Cain is like terrified of them, of people, of the city, and instead he's actually gonna go build his own civilization.
Hmm.
Like maybe like, oh, they're scary. I can do this. I can build my own. I'll make my own city. I'm gonna like it's again this idea of the self-made, the entrepreneurial. I can do this. I will have the power. I will take control. Screw them in their cities. I'll make my own city, and we'll see how that goes. Yeah. So I wonder if that's kind of what's going on.
Hmm.
Um, yeah, and it's like this idea of him trying to rely on the city as protection. Ellul actually pointed this out in the reading. He says that Cain is told to rely on an invisible sign, but the oat, the protection, but he seems to like refuse this. He doesn't mention it even, and instead he focuses on what he can actually get and grasp. Right, and this is what we do.
Hmm.
It's like we don't want to trust a god for protection. We want the tangibles, right?
Yeah.
We want the things that appear to protect us. And so his heart is like directed towards that's what is seen, and he can't fathom God's unseen protection. So we've seen Cain's heart like always just looking out away from Eden. It's always looking east, right? It's
Hmm.
never looking back towards the garden.
Hmm.
And like that's never towards the unseen protection of God, the sign. All these signs of the characterization of this character in the story are this person who is city-like, he's snake-like, he's dependent on that which is seen and not willing to trust in that which is unseen, and guide his heart towards it, despite all the chances God is giving Cain in this story, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Um, First of all, I just what kind of that triggered for me was just thought about um problematic interpretations where there's like a racialized reading of the Mark of Cain,
Mm-hmm.
um, and how that's been deployed to create all sorts of faulty foundations, but foundations nonetheless for basically racist biblical interpretations that cash out into racist just ideologies and practices and systems.
Mm-hmm.
But that's not what's going on here. Right? It's
Mm-hmm.
not so much a visible um, mark in terms of skin color or anything like that. It's just a sign of protection, as it were, and
And a means of
with
trust,
a
because he
means of
has to
trust.
trust. He has to
Yeah.
trust that God has this on him.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Exactly. Which is something that he clearly is unable to do because he does the opposite of what God tells him to do in order to protect himself, to create a more tangible, visible trust. And do you see a possible link to Abel here, like Havel, right? So this idea of vanity, vapor, smoke, and idolatry. So he murders his brother. Um, his brother kind of just sort of like looms, but like Abel Havel, like the connection there
Mm-hmm.
linguistically. Um, it and this of course comes out in Ecclesiastes, right? Vanity, vanity,
Yeah.
everything's vanity. Chabel, right?
Yeah. Hevel Hevelim. Yeah.
Yeah. So just like Abel who dies, but he never really goes away. He's still there, right? He comes back through Seth's line, but it's just kind of like this visibility and visibility piece is at play here.
Mm-hmm.
Am I making connections where there shouldn't be, or you?
I don't know if yeah, visible, invisible. I actually think, yeah, that very well could be going on. I think you're right that we should see like a first Ecclesiastes right here. Like this is
Yeah,
the first because it's the righteous one who ends up as Hevel,
yeah,
as breath. And so righteousness, what's the value in the end if you're just Hevel? Like
yeah,
what does it mean? What does it matter to be that, right? It's asking that question. It's
yeah,
like you did the right thing and he died for it.
yeah.
What the heck, man? Right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's Ecclesiastes' message. And he
Yeah.
did the right, you do the right thing, you do the wrong thing. It's all like whatever. It all shakes out even in the end. It's called the
Yeah.
grave, right?
Yeah. Yeah. So what do you do? What do you
Yeah.
do? Yeah.
Yeah. It's a great question. You
Yeah.
either remain near the garden or you remain focused towards the garden, or you like Cain, you go out from before Yahweh. That's what it says. He went out from before Yahweh. He went away from the presence of Yahweh. And he
Yeah.
goes east, away
Yeah.
from sacred space.
Yeah.
And the further you get from that space, the more inhumane, the more ungodlike things get, right? Because he
Yeah.
goes to the land of Nod, and everyone, or not everyone, most people know that means wandering. He goes to the
Yeah.
land of wandering. He goes to a land where there is no stability. It's
Hmm.
just this kind of ephemeral, unstable, elusive world. And as much as you build a city in that world of wandering, spoiler, you're still in the land of wandering.
Yeah. I mean, Ellul says this is good old Hebrew irony of play here. Even
Yeah,
when you settle down, you're still in the location of wandering. So,
yeah,
joke's on
exactly. And you
you,
need to make your
Cain.
way back
Yeah.
to west towards
Yeah.
God,
Yeah.
west towards the temple, west towards Eden. But that's not where Cain goes. Instead, he says, further and further away, you become less and less of what you're meant to be as a human, right? It's
Yeah.
this idea of you're still the image of God, but the breath is having certainly a hard time breathing in you.
Yeah.
Certainly you've got pneumonia, and and it's an issue.
Yeah. Yeah. And the antidote's out west.
Yeah,
For
the
your
antidote is
pneumonia.
always west. Yeah,
Yeah.
and like
Yeah.
murder here is leading to the first. It's crazy because like the whole the through line here is that murder and this heart of Cain, the city like heart, is what ends up leading to the first city. And Lowell mentions this, right? And that's a, you've said that a lot at work, and like it's like a tagline of Michael sometimes that yeah, like city and murder are in bed with each other.
Yeah. Yeah.
And like the yeah, like you refuse to be your brother's keeper, and that
Yeah.
leads to society where it's accepted to have a murderous way. I'm
Yeah.
not my brother. I am not my brother's keeper. My brother can go to hell,
Yeah.
and I'll build a city, based on that mentality.
Yeah.
Where if you're not, we're not keeping each other. You're in my city named after me and my dedicated son, and everyone else can go to hell.
Yeah. Yep. And so it's a sign of rebellion, but it's also a sign of murder, betrayal, envy, all these sorts of things. And in the same way that I think it's important to stress that scripturally, before the fall, there wasn't technology, that it only comes after the fall. It's also important to stress like this is the biblical account of the origins of civilization, as it were. And um, this runs totally against the grain of a late modern understanding of both civilization and technology, right? And so the reason why I talk about it a lot with students is because most of us, when we think civilization, we think civilized and big and grand, and we maybe, but we miss the shadow side. We miss the sacrifice and the murder and the war that gets us there. Or even with technology, we love our technologies, but the more you dig into the history of technology, the more you see that war is the tip of the spear of innovation. So
Mhm.
look at any major technology that we rely on today: internet, radio, television, whatever. Uh, War was what precipitated the need for innovation that generated it. And so I always like to say the uncivilized origins of civilization are being documented here. And of course, there's disagreements on this within theological tradition, right? So um, Thomas Aquinas thought that politics would have existed in the garden. Augustine says no, politics comes after, and we see it getting set up here in order to make living possible. Like it's not politics doesn't exist in the best of all worlds. It just makes it possible for us to continue going. Um, and I think Augustine is right and Thomas is wrong. Likewise, Oliver O'Donovan, he's a theological ethicist, political theologian, would read a more positive account of the setting up of the city, right? It's God adopting this form, and again, as a way to make life possible after the fall. But I'm just not convinced by that line of interpretation. And you look closely at history enough, and even right now, sort of so-called biggest civilizations in the world, the most powerful ones in their big old cities and their armies. It's not so grand. It's not so grand. And I like to think of I think there's a parallel here when Cain asks that question, "Am I my brother's keeper?" I think the New Testament version of that is the lawyer who's asking Jesus about the great commandments, and Jesus says,
Yep.
"Love God, love your neighbor as yourself," and the lawyer asks a follow up, "And who's my neighbor?" And it's a similar tone.
Yep.
It's trying to ask a sort of theoretical, like philosophical question to avoid the responsibility to like care for your brother and sister and your neighbor. And Jesus's answer says it all, just like God's answer to Cain says it all. Uh, yes, you are. And oh yeah, your neighbor is the person's been beat up on the side of the road and the person that you've been taught to avoid and hate all your life. Yeah, that's your neighbor. Right.
Yeah, the
So
person you despise most right now.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Love them.
Am I my brother's keeper? The one that I just slaughtered and I hate?
Yeah,
The answer is yes, you still are. The
yeah,
one you hate is the one that you are responsible to be the keeper of.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So let's talk about the city itself, right? So he names
Yeah.
the city Enoch and names the city after his own lineage.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, but yeah, talk about just kind of what are the features of this city and
Yeah.
what does this get us in terms of like what's going on in there?
Yeah.
Why is it
Well,
so bad?
yeah, I mean, there's a lot here. But I think we're gonna have a tale of two cities, as someone once said,
Whoa, Charles
or a tale,
Dickens quote.
or even even the city of God and the city of man, so to speak, here too.
Come
Uh,
on,
yeah,
biblical scholar with some good old two cities theology.
yeah, and that's really what's going on, I think, because you've got Enoch, the son, and the city named after named dedication. That's what it means, something like that, or initiation. And this is going to be contrasted with the line of Seth. So Seth is going to be the next son born after Abel to Adam and Eve. And so Seth is going to name his son Enosh. It sounds kind of like Enoch, not exactly the same in Hebrew, but it's similar. And Enosh is going to be in contrast to the city of Cain and city of his son, which is building a name for himself, naming after himself. It's all inward focused, self grandeur, self establishment. Again, all these things of Cain like things, city like things, snake like things that have been going on. Instead, Enosh is going to be the first one, it says, to call on the name of Yahweh. And we all heard calling on the name of Yahweh as this theme in the Old Testament of actually seeking God, right?
Hmm.
And so while you've got, on the one hand, Cain dedicating, initiating this new world, the city world, in contrast, you've got Enosh, and his name means human being, a man, humanity even. And so the city is born from the one son, and humanity, quote unquote, from the other. Not to say that Cain was not a human or not in the image of God. This, he is, but like trueness, true calling, true to what we are as humans, is to call on the name of Yahweh. So ultimately, the city is introduced as that which is distant from sacred space, distant from God, and that by which humans build a name for themselves. And then we've got the contrast of Enosh and the line of Seth, which are going to call on Yahweh. I think that's what the implication is, that if Enosh calls on Yahweh, well, so also do the children in that line. And so it's a tale of two sons, the good sons and the bad sons, the two cities, two people groups. And this is going to be a constant contrast in the Bible. So you'll see it again with Babylon, right? That city says they want to build a name for themselves, whereas God destroys that name for themselves and tells Abraham, the nobody, that he'll build a name for him outside of the city. Abraham will be a wanderer, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
So again, questioning this idea, and we can talk more about Babylon later, but questioning the value of the monolithic, self-indulgent, presumptuous city that has directed people away from the garden paradise and from Yahweh's presence, and from calling on the name of Yahweh.
Yeah. Yeah. And we get to the New Testament, and where was Jesus crucified? Was it
Mm-hmm.
in the city? No, it was outside the city.
Yep.
Judged wrongly inside the city, but
Yeah.
rejected by the city and executed outside the city. And so I kind of, he's spit out of the city,
Yeah.
just like Jonah was spit out of the whale. And of course, people are like, Jesus, give us a sign, give us a sign. He's like, I'm just giving you the sign of Jonah. That's it. I'm not going to do any magic tricks. I'm going to just wait until a really, really big thing I'm going to do, right?
Yep.
Which is, yeah, the resurrection. But the sacred space is not in the city; it's outside. Yeah,
Yeah. 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 No. Yes. And the irony of that story is that the sacred space supposed to be in the city of Jerusalem, like the
yeah,
temple, and it's like actually the place where God is outside of the city being
yeah.
crucified.
That there it is. There's that
Yeah.
biblical irony again, right?
Yeah. Oh,
Sarcasm
absolutely.
is biblical. Irony is
Oh,
biblical.
absolutely it is.
Yeah,
Dripping,
yeah.
dripping with irony and sarcasm in many places.
Welcome back to the Thunderdome.
Yeah. So one thing that I think people miss is this really important scene that's overlooked in the genealogy of Lamech. And you're like, whoa, not important. Never always skip over your right, Joel.
Rule number one:
Yeah,
genealogies, very important.
absolutely. Genealogies are it. If you don't care about genealogy, you're missing the whole story. Not always, but
I feel like
so
that needs to be said in a Chris Farley voice.
you
If
go
you
for
don't
it.
care about genealogies, you don't know jack squat.
That was great.
I told people that they're gonna get a very interesting look at what Joel and I do in the office.
What y'all are seeing right now, this is an average Tuesday.
It's true.
Yeah. All right. So this is passage. I'll read it because it's everyone skips it. And Lamech took himself two wives. The name of the first was Ada, and the name of the second was Zillah. And Ada gave birth to Jabal. He was the father of those who live in tents and those who have livestock. And the name of his brother was Jubal. He was the father of all who play stringed instruments and wind instruments. And then Zillah also gave birth to Tubal Cain, who forged all kinds of tools of bronze and iron. And the sister of Tubal Cain was Naamah. And so people go, okay, interesting. Why does this matter at all? It matters a lot, I think, in the characterization of what's going on, what we've been talking about for the Cain-like people. So you've got a descendant of Cain here, uh, and this is the first like scene of the city outside of Eden, so to speak. You've got like these birthings that go on and the people being born, but then actually what's going on here. And so in this first scene outside of Eden, first off we get polygamy, which is something to think about. He's the first polygamist, Lamech, and he's also in the if you read carefully, he's a completely self-entitled womanizer. At least I think so. And that's what you find in the city. So you get Lamech, he says to his wives, Ada and Zillah, hey, listen to my voice. O wives of Lamech, hear my words. I have killed a man for wounding me, even a young man for injuring me, and you better watch out. Right? Like you hear his language, like even a young man. If Cain is avenged sevenfold, then Lamech will be avenged 70 and 7 times. So the guy in this first song of his city, it's in poetic meter. He's threatening his wives. He kills anyone, even young people, even you, wives of Lamech. So know your role, right?
Wow.
That's what's going on with this guy in the
Yeah.
first city. And so it's this really crazy story of like a contrast of the Song of Adam with the Song of Lamech and the Song of Adam and Eve being a pair, and here Lamech and polygamy, and it's wild.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's further and further descent, right?
Yeah, away
That
from the
parallel,
presence.
yeah, with the song of recognition and celebration of of the first woman to where we are now. Then Cain is kind of the bridge to that with his nameless wife. And
Hmm.
it's one big long issue with naming. And uh, this is a big issue. And sort of connecting to what we were talking about before in terms of the city, it's civilization, the sort of uh, place of innovation, economy, politics, all of it. And we're seeing the sort of genealogy of it. And what's really interesting is actually history, archaeology, anthropology also comes in and says, yeah, actually, when we talk about the origins of the city and civilization, like what was it that caused people to settle down initially, moving from roaming, hunting, gathering to settling down? Okay, well, maybe farming, but actually, it was the need to band together and protect each other. And so, actually, violence, the threat of murder, war, is at the origins of the city and therefore civilization. And you see that getting off the ground here. Yes, you get the arts and culture. Yes, you get the industry and agriculture, but you also get weapons, right? And walls. Like these are the
Mhm.
we need to settle down. We need to build walls so we can guard ourselves from whoever else is coming. And then you get borders, and then you right. Um, so ain't the big city grand? And
Yeah, right, right.
you talk about Lamech, and I'm like, sounds kind of familiar, doesn't it? A womanizer who is
Self-entitled,
big
abusive womanizer, produced the first
tech tech
technology, civilized
tech
culture,
guy,
tech guy.
you
Yeah.
know, all brash. sounds sounds kind of familiar. There's some people around today
Tech people
even
are
that are
never
like
like
that.
that. Tech people
Yeah,
are never like that. No.
yeah. So not Elon Musk. We're not talking about Elon Musk here.
I didn't say that.
See, this is exactly where biblical studies and theology and theological ethics differ. Is biblical studies will just imply it, and then I'll just be like, I'm going to say it. Someone's got to say it. I'll be the one to say it. Who cares? Or it's important enough to be said. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
yeah,
I
exactly.
mean,
But
yeah, it certainly is indicative or at least elusive
yeah,
of the kinds of people that city and technology end up producing, right? I think it's
yeah,
again putting the question mark on. I don't think it's saying wrong to
no,
produce
no,
to
no,
have these things.
yeah,
The question is if you have them but nothing else, what value shall it be to you?
yeah,
I think it's kind of getting more at that. Like
yeah,
Lamech, yeah, he's interesting. He's assuming the rights of his grandfather. He's assuming like it's like this very presumptuous. Well, I get 77 times. I guess much manifold more than the seven that because he's seven generations from Cain as well. So
yeah,
it's like seven times more. And he'll be contrasted actually with the seventh from Adam, which we can talk about in a minute, where uh, Enoch, same name as the son of Cain, he will be the seventh. Is someone who calls on God and walks with God, whereas Lamech is as far as you can get,
right,
right? Of this city guy, this
yeah,
womanizer. Yeah.
yeah.
So we're gonna we're
I
gonna we're gonna see that. But I think there's an interesting line here. Can I mention this line about Nama?
Yes,
Because
you can.
nobody mentions this, and
Is
maybe they
this is
have.
this is this the pleasant line piece thing that you want to
Yeah,
talk about? Can I
yeah,
just jump in before you say that? Because
yeah. Go for
I
it.
do
Yeah,
want to be clear that we really are digging into the more critical edge of scripture, towards the city, towards technology, and I was just being a little bit hypercritical there about particular leaders. And I think it's important to stress that the city isn't, condemned across the board. I mentioned it before and I'll mention it again. Even when Israel is in exile, they're told to settle down in Babylon and plant gardens and seek the welfare of the city. And of course, God adopts the form of the city because the new heavens and new earth are the city. So there's always the possibility of redemption. And the way in which you move towards, not away from redemption, is don't be like Lamech, don't be like Cain. Like
Mhm.
that's what they're saying is it's not bad all the way down. There's different ways to do cities. There's different ways to do technology. There's different ways to be a guy who happens to work in technology and have some influence. Just don't move away from God, move towards him. That's essentially what the ethic is here. It's important to
Yeah.
stress that.
And again, it's a tale of two sons, two cities, two peoples. Cain and everyone have all this stuff, the technology, the city. But then the other line, the other genealogy, is about people who call on the name of the Lord, and they don't have any, it doesn't mention anything about technology or city,
Mhm.
but they have something that the other city does not, or the other people does not. And I think this is actually about. Can I get to the Nama thing now? Because
Yeah,
this is
let's
actually
get to the Nama thing.
This is directly connected. The
Good. We're
last
not
line.
shoehorning. This
No, no,
works.
no. No, it says, and the sister of Tubal Cain was Naamah. And you should be asking, what does that have to do with anything, author of Genesis? Like, okay, who cares, right? Why is the sister even mentioned?
Joel cares. Joel
Oh, let
cares.
me tell you why it matters. Because again, the way that I approach the Hebrew Bible is this is literature. This is trying to teach at deep levels and in ancient ways that we don't always connect with. But here, the name means something. There's a pun going on here again. So I don't even know, like I haven't searched the literature. I don't even know if people mention this. This could be my own idea that someone might write a paper on now that they've heard this. Please cite me. But yeah, so her name is Naama. Why is she mentioned? There's no sisters mentioned elsewhere here in this list. Why bother? The name Naama, it means pleasant. So it's a pun. All this city, all this technology, all of it, well, it was pleasant. And their sister was pleasant. And it was pleasant. It's this idea of introducing the idea of pleasantness into this, what was just described, a city with technology. So, in one sense, yes, it was pleasant. But at the same time, it's like, is it actually really pleasant? Is this really all there is? And this whole city, this whole technology lacks one thing: nobody calls on the name of Yahweh. So they have it. They have the pleasant world. You've got your Tesla. You've got your Android. You've got your luxury in that you have air conditioning, and you've got your home and your cars and your skip the dishes. You got all the technologies in the world. But do you lack the one thing? That's what it's asking. You can have it all and it's pleasant. But do you lack the one thing, which is calling on the name of the Lord, on
Mm-hmm.
Yahweh?
Mm-hmm.
And that's the
Yeah.
theology. That's the ethic here that's being
Yeah.
taught through genealogies.
Love it. I love it. Yeah. And when you say that, man, I don't know. I've got Saturday Night Live on the brain here, but I'm just now picturing Dana Carvey's church lady.
I don't remember that one.
Isn't that special? It's just like it's like a condescending, like, you know, isn't that pleasant, right? Like it's like, hey God, we got all of this amazing, urban civilization. We got our Teslas and our cool technology, and God's just like, well, isn't that special?
I love
This
it.
is how I think. This is how I
You think
think
in
when you say
Saturday Night
really
Live
smart
memes.
things. I'm like, oh, that sounds a lot like Chris Farley, Dana Carvey. So that was the second part of my conversation with Joel. Thanks for joining. Final part is coming next week. Stay tuned for that. In the meantime, if you want to follow this show, it's personalistmanifestos.substack.com, and you can follow Joel on YouTube. It's just at Joel Korytko. I won't bother trying to spell it. I'll put it in the show notes. You can check it out there. Until our next conversation, keep on contemplating revolution.